Have you ever noticed that the deepest cuts rarely come from strangers, but from those sitting right across the table sharing a meal with you? What if the loyalty you feel toward your family is secretly being used to make you carry a pain that does not belong to you? If you have ever felt small, anxious, or emotionally exhausted after a family gathering, wondering why a simple joke felt like a heavy weight on your chest, this is for you. Stay until the end, because the final lesson may change the way you see this familiar pain forever. 1. The hidden sting of familiar voices. Here is the truth few people want to face. The room is loud, laughter fills the air, plates are passed, and then it happens. A comment is made. It is dressed up as a harmless joke. It is delivered with a casual smile. A quick, passing remark about your career, your body, your past mistakes, or the life choices you have made. Everyone chuckles. You are expected to laugh too, to be a good sport, to not take things so seriously. But inside, something tightens. A familiar coldness spreads through your stomach. You swallow the hurt, telling yourself it is just how they are. You convince yourself that enduring these tiny, sharp moments is simply the price of family loyalty. You sit in silence, absorbing the hidden poison of their words. Buddhist wisdom teaches us that much of our suffering comes from our attachments. Not just our attachment to physical things, but our deep attachment to the roles we believe we must play. We cling to the idea of what a family should be, or the dutiful role we must fulfill within it. In doing so, we confuse enduring suffering with demonstrating love. We believe that to be loyal, we must be a quiet container for someone else's unhealed pain. But holding on to a burning ember simply because someone you love handed it to you will still leave you with burned hands. Imagine a still, quiet lake reflecting the evening sky. Suddenly, a heavy stone is thrown into the water. The surface violently breaks. The ripples disturb everything in their path. A painful comment disguised as a joke is exactly like that stone. When it is thrown into the quiet space of your mind, it creates waves of self-doubt, anger, and sadness. You try to force a smile, pretending the water is still calm. But beneath the surface, the mud has been violently stirred. We experience this over and over during holidays, reunions, and casual weekend visits. A relative speaks out of their own hidden insecurity, wrapping their judgment in the safe guise of teasing. And because they are family, we accept the stone. We let it sink to the bottom of our minds, where it slowly adds weight to our own insecurities. Ask yourself this: why do you feel obligated to catch the heavy stones others throw at you? What are you truly afraid will happen if you simply let the comment fall to the ground, untouched and unacknowledged? Is this habit of silent endurance bringing you peace, or is it feeding a quiet resentment? The next time a painful word is masked as humor, do not rush to perform. Do not rush to force the polite smile. Stop. Breathe. Observe the tightening in your chest without letting it dictate your reaction. Let the words hang in the air for a moment. You do not have to absorb the blow just because the person delivering it shares your history. You are allowed to witness the comment without welcoming it into your heart. Because the habit of accepting pain is not loyalty. It is simply a habit. But recognizing the stone is only the first step. To truly detach, you must examine the deeply rooted illusion that tells you this suffering is required. And this is where the next truth begins. 2. The illusion of loyalty as suffering. What if the loyalty you have been practicing your entire life is actually a quiet form of self-betrayal? We are often taught from a very young age that family is the ultimate foundation. We are conditioned to forgive instantly, to overlook deep flaws, and above all else, to keep the peace. You learn to carefully read the room. You learn to make yourself just a little bit smaller so that others can take up more space. When a relative mocks your passions, questions your life choices, or delivers a stinging judgment masked as playful banter, your immediate instinct is to shield them from the awkwardness of their own words. You swallow the insult. You stay quiet. You mistake this silent endurance for devotion. You tell yourself that being a good family member means being strong enough to take the hit. But Buddhist wisdom teaches us the profound importance of clear seeing, the practice of witnessing things exactly as they are, without the heavy layers of illusion we wrap around them. We carry a powerful illusion that suffering in silence makes us noble. We cling to the belief that if we just absorb enough of their bitterness, we are somehow holding the family together. But Buddhism reminds us that true compassion must be boundless, and if your compassion does not include yourself, it is incomplete. Allowing someone to repeatedly disturb your peace is not an act of love. It is simply an attachment to a deeply painful habit. Imagine a strong, ancient tree standing at the edge of a vast forest. Throughout the changing seasons, violent storms roll in. The tree's true loyalty is to its deep roots and the solid earth beneath it. It does not reach out its branches to catch the fierce wind. It does not try to hold on to the freezing rain. If the tree attempted to fight or absorb every violent gust, its branches would surely break under the pressure. Instead, it stands tall and still. It lets the storm howl through its leaves. It remains fully present in the weather, but it does not take ownership of the storm's fury. At family gatherings, the masked insults, the cynical questions, and the cruel jokes are simply the wind. Yet, how often do you reach out to catch them? When you force a laugh at your own expense, or when you emotionally exhaust yourself trying to defend your life path to someone who is determined to misunderstand you, you are fighting the wind. You are bending your branches until they snap, all to make the storm feel more comfortable in your presence. Ask yourself, how many times have you sacrificed your own inner peace just to prevent a moment of uncomfortable silence at the dinner table? Who taught you that your emotional exhaustion was the required price of admission to be loved by your own family? The next time you feel the pressure to absorb a harsh joke, bring your awareness back to your own presence. Pause. Feel your feet resting firmly on the floor. Imagine your roots growing deep into the earth. Let the careless words blow right past you. You can remain quietly in the room without letting the chaos of the room live inside of you. You do not have to fight the wind, and you certainly do not have to let it break you. You can simply observe the weather passing by. Because true loyalty is not measured by how much unnecessary pain you can quietly absorb. It is measured by your ability to stay grounded in your own truth, even when the environment around you is turbulent. But stepping out of this illusion of loyalty is only the beginning. To truly free yourself from the sting of their words, you must first recognize what those words actually are. And this is where the next truth begins. 3. The poison arrow in the room. What if your greatest suffering comes not from the insult itself, but from what you do with it after it is spoken? Here is a painful reality. The dinner ends. The tables are cleared. The relative who delivered the stinging joke has already gone home, sleeping soundly and completely forgetting what they even said. But you have not forgotten. You carry their words with you into the car. You carry them into your home. You lay in the quiet of your bedroom, staring at the dark ceiling, replaying the conversation on a relentless loop. You analyze the exact tone of their voice. You search for the hidden meaning. You craft the perfect, sharp reply. You wish you had spoken in the moment. The physical gathering is over, but in your mind, you are still sitting at the table, actively bleeding from their words. One of the deepest lessons of Buddhism is found in the teaching of the two arrows. Imagine a person walking through a forest who is suddenly struck by a poisoned arrow. It is a moment of sharp, unexpected pain. But instead of immediately pulling the arrow out to save their own life, the wounded person stops. They demand to know who shot the arrow. They demand to know what kind of wood the shaft is made from. and what type of bird provided the feathers. They obsess over the intent of the archer, and while they are completely consumed by these questions, the poison silently spreads through their veins. Buddhism reminds us that the first arrow is the unavoidable pain of life. It is the careless joke. It is the hurtful comment. It is the sudden lack of empathy from someone you love. We cannot always control the first arrow, but the second arrow is our reaction. It is the overthinking. It is the story we tell ourselves about what the insult means regarding our deep self-worth. When your relative disguises a cruel comment as humor, they are firing the first arrow. It stings. It is deeply unfair. But when you spend the next 3 days obsessively replaying the event, wondering why you are never respected, you are picking up the bow. You are firing a second, third, and fourth arrow directly into your own chest. They only hurt you once, for a fleeting second. You are choosing to hurt yourself 100 times more. Think about your own life. How much of your current emotional exhaustion is caused by the actual words that were spoken at the table? And how much is caused by your own mind refusing to let those words go? Why do you insist on studying the poison arrow instead of simply pulling it out? The next time an insult lands, you must make a profound choice. Pause, breathe, feel the sudden sting of the first arrow. Let it hurt for a moment. Acknowledge the unfairness of it, but absolutely refuse to fire the second arrow. Do not let their careless moment become your lingering identity. You do not need to figure out why they are the way they are. You do not need to decode their bitterness. You only need to pull the arrow out and leave it on the ground, because your peace is far too valuable to be destroyed by someone else's lack of awareness. But to stop firing the second arrow, you must learn how to master the quiet space between their words and your reaction. And this is where the next truth begins. 4. The power of the pause. What if the most powerful response you can ever offer to a painful comment is absolute, unbothered silence? Here is a truth we rarely consider in the heat of the moment. When the disguised joke lands at the family table and the nervous laughter ripples through the room, your immediate instinct is to rush in. You feel a burning urge to react. You might quickly force a laugh to camouflage your own embarrassment. You might scramble to explain yourself, desperate to prove their judgment wrong. Or you might feel the sudden heat of anger, tempted to fire back with a sharp retort of your own. We have been conditioned to believe that if we do not answer immediately, we are showing weakness. We think that silence equals defeat. But Buddhist wisdom teaches us that true freedom exists in the tiny space between a stimulus and your response. Mindfulness is not just a peaceful meditation on a quiet morning. It is the fierce, active practice of guarding your inner peace when the world around you becomes chaotic. Buddhism reminds us that reactivity is a chain of suffering. When a relative speaks from a place of unhealed bitterness, they are unconsciously offering you a link in their heavy chain. If you instantly react, whether through defensive anger or submissive laughter, you have accepted the chain. You have bound yourself to their negativity. Imagine a single candle burning quietly in a dark, still room. Suddenly, someone walks in and aggressively waves a heavy fan toward the light. If the flame dances wildly, desperately fighting the violent air, it burns itself out. It loses its steady glow and quickly extinguishes. But what if the flame could simply pull its energy inward? What if it could rest low on the wick, holding its quiet center, and simply wait for the turbulent air to pass? The cruel remarks and the subtle put-downs are exactly like that heavy fan. The person speaking expects a reaction. They expect the flame to dance. They want to pull you into their familiar rhythm of conflict, defense, or submission. They throw their heavy words into the air, hoping you will catch them. Ask yourself this: what usually happens when you rush to defend your life choices to a relative who has already decided to misunderstand you? Does your defense ever bring deep understanding, or does it only leave you feeling utterly exhausted and empty? What are you truly afraid will happen if you simply let their comment hang in the empty air, completely unanswered? The next time a painful word is sent your way, do not rush to fill the silence. Stop, breathe. Let the feeling rise without making it your identity. Feel your feet firmly resting on the floor. Look calmly at the person who spoke and offer them nothing but the absolute stillness of your presence. Let the silence stretch. Let the awkwardness of their own unkind words settle heavily onto their own shoulders. A pause is not a surrender. It is an impenetrable shield. It forces the disguised joke to stay exactly where it belongs with the person who felt the need to say it. Because true power is never found in having the perfect comeback. It is found in the deep, unshakable knowing that your inner peace does not require a defense. But maintaining this powerful silence requires you to deeply understand why they threw the stone in the first place. And this is where the next truth begins. 5. Detaching from their reflection of you. What if the harsh judgment they place on your life has absolutely nothing to do with who you truly are? Here is a truth that is deeply difficult to accept when your heart is hurting. When a family member repeatedly points out your flaws, mocks your passions, or questions your life choices at the dinner table, it feels intensely personal. It feels like a direct attack on your worth. Because they have known you for years, we falsely assume they must see a fundamental truth about us that we are secretly trying to hide. We begin to internalize their cynical critique. We start to believe that if our own family sees us as foolish, incapable, or lost, then it must be real. We take their disguised jokes and wear them like a heavy, wet coat we never asked for, carrying that weight long after the gathering is over. But Buddhist wisdom teaches us the profound nature of illusion and the clouded mind. Buddhism reminds us that people can only perceive the world and the people in it through the narrow lens of their own internal state. If a mind is clouded by deep regret, fear, or insecurity, it cannot see anything clearly. One of the deepest lessons we can learn is that when someone speaks from a place of unhealed pain, they are not offering an accurate observation of you. They are simply broadcasting their own inner suffering to the room. Imagine looking into a muddy, violently turbulent river, desperately trying to see your own reflection. The image looking back at you is completely distorted, fractured, and dark. If you trust the muddy water, you will walk away deeply convinced that you are broken and misshapen. You will spend your life trying to fix a face that is not actually flawed. But the distortion does not belong to your face. It belongs entirely to the turbulent, unsettled water. This is exactly what happens at a holiday dinner. A relative who secretly feels left behind in their own life might aggressively mock your new ambitions. Someone who feels trapped in their own choices might quietly undermine your quiet independence. They are looking at you, but they are speaking directly to their own ghosts. You are simply the nearest blank canvas for them to throw their turbulent water upon. Think about your own life. How many years have you spent trying to fix a flaw that someone else entirely imagined for you? How much of your self-doubt was actually planted by a relative who is terrified of their own inadequacy? Why do you continue to trust the reflection offered by a muddy, turbulent mind? The next time a relative speaks to you with bitterness wrapped in a joke, do not absorb the distorted image. Stop, breathe, observe the thought without following it. See the muddy water for exactly what it is. You do not need to correct them. You do not need to aggressively prove that your reflection is beautiful. Let them keep their heavy, unsettled water. You are not what they say you are. You are simply the silent space watching them struggle with their own illusions. Because you do not have to shrink yourself to fit inside the small dark box of someone else's unhealed pain. But to step fully out of that box without creating more conflict, you must understand the true nature of protecting your peace. And this is where the next truth begins. 6. The true meaning of compassionate boundaries. What if the most compassionate thing you can do for a hurtful person is to stop allowing them to hurt you? Here is a truth we deeply misunderstand about love and endurance. We are conditioned to believe that compassion means infinite access. We think that because they are family, we must leave the doors to our heart wide open, even when they constantly walk in with mud on their shoes. We fear that stepping away, refusing to engage, or guarding our energy makes us cold, selfish, or unforgiving. So, we stay seated at the table. We endure the passive-aggressive jokes. We let them continually cross our unseen lines, falsely believing that our endless, silent patience will eventually heal their bitterness. But Buddhist wisdom teaches us the profound difference between true compassion and blind submission. In Buddhist thought, a compassion that does not include yourself is broken. There is no spiritual virtue in allowing someone else's ignorance to continuously trample your spirit. Furthermore, Buddhism reminds us of the principle of non-harming. When you allow a relative to repeatedly use you as a target for their hidden anger, you are allowing them to cause harm to both you and themselves. A wise boundary is not a wall built out of anger. It is a protective space built out of deep clarity. Imagine a serene, beautiful garden that you have spent years carefully cultivating. It is a place of deep quiet and delicate blooming flowers. Now imagine leaving the gate wide open, allowing a panicked wild animal to rush in. The animal thrashes around, breaking the branches and tearing up the soft earth. Allowing the animal to destroy your sanctuary does not soothe the animal, and it leaves your garden in ruins. Closing the gate is not an act of hatred toward the wild creature. It is simply a necessary act of respect for the garden. Your inner peace is that garden. At family gatherings, when the conversation turns sharp and the disguised insults begin to fly, you often leave your gate completely open. You let their chaotic, unhealed energy rush in and destroy your quiet center. But creating distance does not mean you must aggressively fight the animal. It simply means you gently, quietly lock the gate. You choose not to attend every argument you are invited to. You give yourself permission to calmly leave the room or change the subject without an apology. Think about your own life. Are you confusing silent submission with love? What are you truly afraid will happen if you gently but firmly close the gate to your emotional space? Why do you believe your inner sanctuary is not worthy of being guarded? The next time the jokes turn cruel, remember that you are not trapped. Stop, breathe. You do not have to announce your exit. You do not have to start a loud war to protect your quiet peace. Stop trying to force the door open to an understanding they cannot give. Let the storm pass without becoming the storm. Because protecting your peace is not an act of rejection. It is the highest form of self-respect. But what happens when you cannot physically leave the table and you must find a way to sit directly in the center of the noise without losing yourself? And this is where the next truth begins. 7. The strength of the silent observer. What if you could sit directly in the center of the fire without ever getting burned? Here is a deeply difficult reality of family gatherings. Sometimes you simply cannot walk away. The dinner is only halfway finished. You are seated at the center of a crowded table. The relative beside you delivers a sharp, familiar critique, masked as a casual observation. The nervous laughter ripples through the room once again. Your heart rate accelerates. Your hands feel cold. You feel utterly trapped, suffocated by the heavy expectation that you must sit there and silently absorb the blow. The physical exit is blocked, and the urge to either explode in anger or shrink into complete invisible submission feels overwhelming. But Buddhist wisdom teaches us a profound technique for survival in the center of chaos. It is the practice of becoming the silent witness. Buddhism reminds us that we are not our immediate thoughts, we are not our sudden emotions, and we are certainly not the harsh environment surrounding us. We are the quiet consciousness observing it all. When you identify too closely with the sudden flush of embarrassment or anger, you become deeply entangled in the suffering. But when you mentally step back and simply watch the moment unfold as a detached observer, you strip the painful words of their power. You separate the event from your core identity. Imagine a small, sturdy boat moving through incredibly rough water. The sky is dark, the wind is howling, the waves crash violently against the wooden sides, sending cold, bitter water over the deck. If you identify with the turbulent water, you will feel as though you are drowning. You will panic. You will aggressively fight the ocean, exhausting yourself in a battle you cannot possibly win. But what if you remember that you are not the water? You are securely seated inside the boat. You can hear the roar of the wind. You can feel the sudden rocking from side to side. You can witness the complete violence of the storm, but you remain safe and untouched inside your vessel. The loud, critical voices at the family table are simply the rough water. The disguised jokes are the heavy waves crashing against the side of the hull. When you take the comments personally, you are throwing yourself out of the safety of the boat and straight into the freezing ocean. You are drowning in their bitterness. But when you become the silent observer, you stay securely inside. You watch their insecurity rise and fall like a temporary, meaningless wave. You observe the deep awkwardness in the room without taking ownership of it. Think about your own life. How many times have you thrown yourself into the freezing water just because someone else created a wave? Why do you feel the need to drown in the exact same pain that your relative is unconsciously struggling with? What if you simply watched the wave crash, knowing it cannot pull you under unless you willingly jump in? The next time you are physically stuck in a room filled with disguised hostility, do not abandon your safety. Pause, breathe, do your part, then release the outcome. Sit back slightly in your chair. Imagine a quiet, invisible space separating you from the person speaking. Watch them. Observe their tone, their posture, and their hidden fear, exactly as you would watch a loud storm raging outside a thick glass window. Let the feeling rise without making it your identity. You can remain in the room without letting the chaos of the room live inside of you. Because true inner peace is not found by perfectly controlling your environment. It is found by completely detaching from the chaos within it. But as you learn to quietly observe, you will quickly realize you are still carrying an invisible, heavy burden that makes these moments feel so deeply exhausting. And this is where the next truth begins. 8. Releasing the weight of expectation. What if the heaviest burden you carry into a family gathering is not what they say to you, but what you secretly hope they will finally say? Here is a quiet, painful truth we rarely admit to ourselves. Every time a holiday approaches or a family dinner is planned, you walk through the front door carrying a tiny, persistent seed of hope. You secretly hope that this time it will be different. You hope that this time they will see how hard you have worked. You hope the disguised jokes will finally stop. You desperately hope they will offer the warmth, respect, and quiet approval you have spent your entire life trying to earn. And when the exact opposite happens, when the familiar sharp comments begin and the laughter echoes at your expense, the deepest pain is not actually the insult itself. The deepest pain is the sudden, crushing death of your expectation. You are heartbroken because they did not act like the family you wished they were. You are exhausted from waiting for a change that never comes. Buddhist wisdom teaches us that our deepest suffering is born from our attachment to how we believe things should be. We cling fiercely to a mental image of an ideal reality. We expect people to evolve into the healed, mindful versions of themselves. that we desperately need them to be. But Buddhism reminds us to practice profound acceptance. It teaches us to see things exactly as they are, not as we demand them to be. When we constantly demand that a hurtful relative suddenly become compassionate and understanding, we are passionately arguing with reality. And when you argue with reality, you will always lose. Imagine a weary traveler standing in front of a completely barren, dry tree in the dead of winter. The traveler is incredibly hungry. They stand before the bare branches for hours, demanding that the tree produce a sweet, ripe apple. When the tree remains empty, the traveler falls to the ground, weeping, feeling betrayed and deeply rejected by the tree. But the tree is not being intentionally cruel. It simply does not have any apples to give. The traveler's intense suffering is not caused by the tree, it is caused entirely by their demand that the tree be something it is completely incapable of being. The relatives who use sarcasm to hide their own pain, the ones who deliver sharp critiques over dinner, the ones who refuse to understand you, they are the barren tree. You keep returning to them, year after year, offering your open heart, hoping for the sweet fruit of respect and unconditional love. And every time they offer you a bitter, disguised joke instead, you feel completely betrayed. But they are simply offering the only thing they have. They cannot give you the emotional maturity they do not possess. Think about your own life. Are you truly exhausted by their behavior? Or are you exhausted by your own relentless hope that they will finally change? What would happen if you completely dropped the heavy expectation that they must understand you? Is this constant hope bringing you peace? Or is it feeding your quiet heartbreak? The next time you walk into a family gathering, leave your heavy expectations at the door. Stop, breathe, accept them exactly as they are, without demanding they be anything more. Do not wait for an apology they do not know how to give. Stop trying to force the barren tree to bloom. Let go of the fantasy family in your mind so you can peacefully navigate the real one sitting directly in front of you. Because true freedom is not found in finally getting the approval you deserve. It is found when you realize you no longer need it to be completely whole. But releasing this heavy expectation leaves a sudden, quiet, open space within your heart. And this is where the final truth begins. 9. Reclaiming your inner sanctuary. What if the greatest act of love you can offer your family is to finally refuse the pain they try to hand you? Think back to where we began. You are sitting at the loud, crowded table. The plates are being passed. The familiar voices fill the room. And then the comment comes, the sharp, disguised joke, the subtle judgment wrapped in a careless smile. But this time, something is profoundly different. You do not tighten. You do not swallow the familiar coldness in your stomach. You do not quicker force a hollow love you, camouflage your own embarrassment. You sit there, completely still, and you see the muddy water of their own unhealed insecurity. You see the barren tree that simply cannot offer the understanding you once desperately craved. You see the heavy stone they are trying to toss into your quiet lake. And for the very first time in your life, you do not reach out to catch it. You let it fall silently to the floor. This is the profound beauty of non-attachment. Buddhist wisdom teaches us that true transformation does not require the world around us to change. It only requires us to stop clinging to the sharp edges of our own suffering. We spend so much of our lives believing that if we can just absorb enough of our family's pain, if we can just be resilient enough to survive their bitterness, we will eventually earn our place. We deeply confuse self-abandonment with loyalty. But you cannot heal someone else's wound by bleeding right next to them. Imagine the vast, infinite sky above you. Throughout the day, it experiences profound changes. Dark, violent storm clouds roll through. Heavy, bitter rain falls. Fierce winds howl, but the sky never fights the storm. It never tries to stop the clouds from being clouds. It simply holds the space. And when the chaotic weather eventually passes, the sky remains completely untouched, silent, and flawlessly whole. You are that vast sky. The passive-aggressive comments, the mocking laughter, and the cynical judgments are simply passing weather. They do not define you. They cannot break you unless you mistakenly believe you are the storm. You do not need to cut people off in a dramatic explosion of anger. You do not need to win the argument. You only need to reclaim the quiet sanctuary within your own heart. When you stop demanding that they validate your worth, you suddenly realize your worth was never actually in danger. You can sit peacefully in the center of the noise, completely unbothered, knowing your deep value is entirely your own. The habit of accepting pain is officially broken. You are no longer carrying a heavy burden that was never yours to hold. You have finally learned to let the storm pass. Breathe. Let that sink in. You do not have to perform for people who are determined to misunderstand you. You are completely safe within your own silence. If these lessons touched your heart, share this video with someone who may need a little more peace today. You can let go now.